guys all for coming out tonight. I see so many friendly faces, and tonight really is a celebration. More than anything else, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book and do a reading, and we'll definitely do some question and answers. But before I even get started with any of that, I just want to acknowledge this crowd. So many of you are customers of mine. So, Dorothy, did you say something?
No, I'm just trying to get them.
Keep talking. And my customers were one of the biggest inspirations for this book. Every day in the store, women come in and they are smart and beautiful and generous and caring and funny, and we have great time and we tell stories. And then they go to try something on, and every single one of them will complain about her chest or her nose or some part of her body that she absolutely hates, to the point where we finally put a rule in the store that says, while you're here, you are not allowed to complain about your body. But it was really fascinating to me, because while I'm bolstering these women and telling them, no, you're beautiful, and you are. I'm looking around right now, look at this audience, this is a beautiful crowd. I'm going home every night and doing exactly the same thing. Steve would say, oh, you're beautiful, and I'd say, no, I'm not, I've got messy hair, you know. And so the inspiration for this book was largely because of these experiences in the store. And the store occurred, I opened the store right at the start of this book, so the book walks through this journey. But in a nutshell, I was a professional sculptor for most of my adult career. I had a great career, and was strong. I mean, like crazy strong. I could take Steve and put him over my shoulders and spin him around. I was financially independent. I had lots of accolades in the world. And then all of a sudden, my back went out, and I lost everything. So now I can't lift a 25-pound box. I'm financially dependent on my husband and asking him for money, which I swore I would never, ever do. And I lost everything. I lost my whole sense of identity, who I was. And I stayed home for a couple of years and limped along, giving the galleries the least amount that I could to keep it going, but was in excruciating, agonizing pain all the time. And finally, Steve, my husband, came home. Say hi, Steve. Came home, you know, and he was running La Tienda. I checked out from that. I'd abandoned everything pretty much, and he was getting really gray in the face. And coming home at night, I'd say, hi, how was your day? And he'd go, fine. I'd go, what happened? Nothing. And I knew that there was a problem, and I couldn't hide anymore. So I decided to get my back diagnosed and confirm that I couldn't be a sculptor anymore, and to get some hearing aids so I could reemerge myself in the world. And at the time, you know, over this period, I gained a ton of weight.
Back off just a
Oh, I'm sorry. Better? Can you guys hear me now? No. Say again.
back off a little. It's a little buzzy.
Okay. How's that? Can you hear me now? Quick, hold up your phones.
Back off just
Okay, trying now. Trying now. Okay? Okay.
I think we're there. Thanks.
Okay. And if anybody can't hear me, let me know. That I'm very sensitive to that. So anyway, I gained all of this weight, about 50 pounds. And when I went to the doctor to get my back diagnosed, I wanted a thyroid test, and he wouldn't give me one. I demanded it, because I was sure that this wasn't my fault. I did not get fat, you know, because it was something that I was doing. I wanted the magic pill. I wanted a way to be me again, and of course it wasn't thyroid. But what we discovered was that I had another health issue that was critical, and that if I didn't drop this weight and get in shape, I was a walking time bomb for stroke. So that's where the book starts, and a summary of the first couple of chapters. And what Steve and I did was amazing. Together we lost 120 pounds over the course of almost a year, and that was huge. And it was really easy, and it was really sexy, and it was really fun and romantic. We didn't invent anything. We didn't go on fad diets. We just changed everything about our lives. And you can read about that in the book. But what we didn't understand was that by making this commitment to change the way that we ate, we were also making a commitment to really examine some fundamental issues in our lives. And as we went down this weight loss journey, all this stuff started to bubble up. It was like we were down a rabbit hole. And all of a sudden, this amazing, invincible marriage with this love of my life was fractured and vulnerable and falling apart. And I got fractured and vulnerable and falling apart. And as we went further down, more and more stuff surfaced, until by the end of the book, I went like siren, crazy, and had to come out on the other side of that. So this book is really, it's a weight loss journey, definitely. That's the glue that kind of is the thread all the way through. But it really looks at our gender roles. It looks at what women face in the world today. It looks at how we beat ourselves up in 1,000 different ways, how systemic cultural norms invade us and are toxic to even the best marriages and the highest confidence, self-esteem you can get. It eats away at us. And what makes this book very unusual is that a lot of feminist books that talk about these issues really just do it from the woman's perspective. The Romance Diet is Steve and my story, and it very much shows his side of it, as personally and as raw as it shows mine. And I chose to write it super raw. This is about as honest I can get, and I'm terrified in some ways that I'm releasing it in this community. You guys all know me. Now you're going to know me way better than you ever wanted to. In the same breath, Steve and I talked at length about this and decided that our story was so powerful for us and what we learned about ourselves, how we strengthened our marriage, and each of us as individuals going through this process was a story that really needed to be told. And it needed to be told truthfully and with all the pain and joy and everything else that was in there. But I deliberately kept the book very, very short. So it's only 110 pages. Most of you who have not read it will read it in an afternoon. And I did that so that as you're reading it, there are pauses and breathing spaces where you might think about your own lives and how some of what we experienced is relevant to your lives and how you might impact some positive change. At the end of the book, there is a reader's guide, and Kitty and Elaine are here. They say hi. I'm going to do the full introduction in a little while. They're going to potentially come up for a Q&A afterwards as well, but Kitty and Elaine are phenomenal therapists who specialize in trauma, and they really resonated with the book. They felt very strongly that there's not another book out there on the market that deals with all of these issues and the male-female perspective simultaneously. And so they got behind the book and did the reader's guide for me, and we're working together on a book that will hopefully launch sometime in the next year or so. That is a follow-up to this, which really looks it will be the Romance Diet Cookbook, Recipes for Healthy Relationships. So, pardon me? Yeah, it's exciting. Very, very exciting stuff. And what happened for me is this book and this experience put me on a mission. I've never been an activist. I've always, sat on the sidelines and nodded my head when I agreed with something. For what it's worth, I am now adding my voice to the chorus. And so thanks for being here tonight and supporting this journey. I'm going to read one chapter. This is a chapter that gives you a good sense of what the book is about. And then we'll do a Q&A. You guys ready? And again, thanks for being here. We pounded each other with a torrent of angry words. He sat dry-eyed and erect, body quivering with tension. I gathered snatched memories of random events and rendered meaning into them with emotional assistance and hurled them at him, hot tears coursing down my face. Inevitably, he left. His absence ripped my innards, left me hollow, made a puddle of bleeding me on the floor. I sobbed uncontrollably, reached for my phone and called him again and again, begging him to answer. Eventually, he did. Our fights didn't make sense, as if we spoke two different languages or lived in different worlds. A barrier existed between us that prevented real communication. Half the time, I didn't know what we fought about. I only knew I wanted the fights to end. But they didn't. They worsened. I felt stepped on, overrun, and unimportant. Steve denied my sentiments, vehemently objecting to any accusation I made involving him. He could sympathize with my frustrations at work and in the world, but wouldn't agree he was party to them. He'd seen some of what I experienced daily, but with few exceptions. It hadn't sunk in. Early on our joint business adventure, I created an art exhibit space to promote creative economy. Artists showed for free and kept 100% of their sales. The openings drew our community and brought vibrancy and business to the center. At one opening, a man Steve had known for years pulled him aside. "This is incredible, Steve." He gestured at the hundreds of people milling through the space. Excited conversation bubbled like a creek. Wine flowed. Vibrant art colored tall, white walls. "What a wonderful thing you've done here. What a great idea. This is so important, so necessary." Steve shook his head and pulled me near. "Let me introduce you to my wife. This is all her. I just pointed the lights." The man glanced me up and down, gave me a quick... I put up my hand. He gave me a quick up and down and turned back to Steve. "How wonderful of you to support her little projects," he said. Anybody here in this room ever experienced anything like this? I lost my place. Steve's eyes popped wide and his mouth opened. Then, dazed, he took my arm and led me away. While this particular occurrence was extreme, it illuminated my daily life. Every time someone praised Steve for my work, it exacerbated my distress. I'm the idea person, the marketing whiz, the big picture thinker. He implements. This light is killing me, forgive me. Our combined skills are magic, the sum of them greater than the whole. We did the impossible together, but people either didn't see it or didn't want to know. It wasn't uncommon for people to ask if I did the books or helped organize Steve's office. They assumed he wrote the PR copy, came up with the concepts, and did all the work. When I opened my store, he got the credit. That hurt. How could I reinvent myself, move past my grief and the loss of both vocation and career, when the efforts I made were invisible? At work, people not only avoided the reality of my body, they ignored my mind. I felt like an appendage, a belonging covertly hidden behind the proud title of wife. While Steve never indulged the praise or accepted the credit, he unknowingly contributed to my angst. Little things became big in my mind. He read his emails while sharing our lunch. Half listening to a story I recounted, he made a phone call and cut off my sentence. He left his trash and paperwork on my sales counter and often interrupted my work. Normally, the small grievances wouldn't have amounted to much, but this was no ordinary time. The weight loss, new business, and my bottled grief had unraveled a thread, and I was coming apart. So, when we fought and he reiterated all the ways he did support and try to give to me, I felt even more invisible, even more unheard. On a drive back from the buying trip, drained from yet another fight, I tried again. I love you, and this is killing me, I began. Steve's hands tightened on the steering wheel, and he threw me a sharp look. Deep shadows clung to the hollows beneath his eyes. A muscle ticked in his jaw. It's killing me, too. I know. The fingers of his free hand intertwined with mine, and I squeezed them. Steve, I don't know how to explain in a way that will make you understand, but I need to matter. He swallowed and let out a huff of hair. Honey, you do matter. No, I don't. You make every decision. He cut me off. What do you mean I make every decision? You make every decision. Don't yell. I'm trying to talk. We need to talk. I'm not yelling. Yes, you are, but I don't want to go there. You do make every decision. You decide where we eat when we go out, which movie we see, what car we drive home. Destiny, that's not true. I always ask you what you want to do. That was true. He did ask. But I knew in my heart he decided our lives. I just didn't know how to explain it. Out the window, spindly ponderosas stood like sentries in a yellow meadow. Behind it, the forest thickened, blotting out the sky. Late morning sun hurt my eyes. Okay, I said. Never mind. While our fights had increased in frequency and severity, they never lasted long. In between, we lived and loved deeply. A few weeks after our return, we tired of local bands and decided to try a club in Albuquerque. I had worn an outfit I reserved for bigger cities, and Steve had matched me. His crisp collared shirt deepened the blue of his eyes. At a sushi joint, we lamented the still-frozen salmon and clumpy rice. Hot sake warmed my mouth as I leaned across the table to kiss him. He put a hand on my bare thigh. You look beautiful tonight, he said. I glanced down, noting the plunge of my neckline, the curve of my breast lit softly in the candlelight. I felt beautiful, excited, and alive. The anonymity of a strange place emboldened me, and I looked forward to the night. Are you ready? I asked. He flashed a grin at me and stood. Absolutely. We walked to the club, Steve's arm curved around my waist. The warmth of his body contrasted sharply with a swish of fabric on my naked legs, and a shiver ran up my spine. In the central room, country music blared from every corner. Plastic cups littered wood tables, and Hispanic cowboys in bright boots whirled chubby women around the edges of the dance floor, all the couples moving in a line. A long-haired kid in his 20s looked me up and down, curled lips revealing yellow teeth and the tip of a bright pink tongue. We passed neon-lit bars, a karaoke stage where a sweating man bleated Elton John, finally making it to our destination. In the far back room, a red dance floor gleamed against black tiles. Dim blue lights and faux leather booths clung to dark walls. I slid into one of the booths, and Steve headed to the bar for our drinks. The deep bass of music reverberated in my stomach. My feet tapped, my head swayed side to side. On his return, Steve set down the drinks and grabbed my hand. There were only 2 other couples in the room, and we had the floor to ourselves. Oh, so much room to move. What luxury. I gyrated my hips, thrusting slow and deliberate against him, and he laughed out loud. The music released us, and we reveled in the joy of it. Sometimes we danced together, our bodies tight and close. As the tempo increased, we separated, making love across the floor. When finally our legs tired, we returned to our table and gulped first water and then whiskey, the burn of it a silk thread down my throat. Sweat crumpled Steve's crisp shirt, and his lips glowed purple in the blue light. I pushed a stringy strand of hair off my face. The bass thumped. He bent to kiss me and then stopped, glancing up. I turned. A man stood at our table, a bright grin on his face. "You guys are awesome," he said. Steve batched a smile. "Thanks." "I'm Denny. That's my girlfriend, Rose." He gestured to a table on the other side of the room where a plump, pretty woman played with a cup. "If it's okay with you, we'd love to buy you guys a drink." Steve glanced at me. I threw him a look that said, "Why not?" This thing happened occasionally because, frankly, our dancing was hot, and while the attention of single men made me nervous, that of couples did not. "That would be great, Denny, thanks," Steve said. Denny nodded. "What are you having?" "Jim Beam. Neat. I'll be right back." He returned a few minutes later, cups in hand. Behind him, Rose smiled shyly. I stuck out my hand and we introduced ourselves. They were Native American with gleaming black hair, proud cheekbones, and rounded frames. We warmed to them as they talked, he about conversation, she medicine, and when Denny suggested we dance, we agreed. They moved well, and I enjoyed trading partners for a few songs. Watching Steve dance with another woman gave me a glimpse of what we looked like together, and I savored the rare treat. When Denny tired, he stepped off the floor, and I moved to follow, but he waved me back. Then he caught Rose's eyes. Immediately, she stopped moving. He gestured, and she went to him as if caught on a fishing line. They sat down together, and he tossed his chin at Steve. The look said, "Keep dancing." So we did. I twirled toward Steve, and he caught me in his arms. Bending his head to my ear, he said, "What the hell was that?" "I don't know." A laugh caught in my throat. The interchange had been pretty weird. We danced another song before returning to the booth. On arrival, we had discovered Denny had ordered another round. I took a sip and nearly spit it out when Denny said, "Sorry about that. I don't allow her to interact with other men by herself." "Why?" Steve asked. "She's my sub." "What?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm a dom and she's my sub." Steve's lips compressed as he fought to keep his laughter down. "As in bondage?" Denny and Rose exchanged a glass. "Well, sort of," he said. I had read 50 Shades of Grey, to my chagrin, and couldn't help myself. I'm sort of curious about that, lifestyle." Rose grinned, and then she and Denny tried to explain it to us. It wasn't like people thought. Every dom-sub relationship was different. The relationships, or most of them, were based on respect and shared sexual desires. Sometimes, like in their case, the relationship rules applied outside the bedroom, but the rules were something to which they both agreed. Steve and I asked question after question, and these articulate, educated people answered them openly. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. And when Denny invited us to a party where we could witness the variations firsthand, I almost choked. "Let's dance," I said, grabbing Steve's hand. On the floor, I moved in close. "What do you think?" he teased. "About what?" "Them, the party. Do you want to go?" I gave him a lascivious look, batting my eyes, enjoying the teasing. "Well, I don't know. Sounds kind of interesting." He nodded, and I let it go, losing myself once again in the dance. When the song ended, Steve said, "We better get back. I don't want to seem rude." I let him lead me toward the booth, but halfway back to the table, I stopped. "I need to hit the bathroom. I'll be right back." On my return, the check had been paid, and Steve and Denny were exchanging phone numbers. I swallowed hard, not expecting that. We said goodnight to them and made it back to our car with few words between us. On the drive home, I couldn't take it anymore. What was that with the phone numbers?" I asked. "So we can get directions Saturday night." "Directions?" "To the party." I had assumed as much at the club, but I needed to hear it from him. "We're going?" "Yeah." I took a deep breath. Is this something you want to explore?" I was trying to be tactful, but Christ, my husband was interested in bondage and I didn't know. Steve shot me a look. No, I have no interest in going at all. That surprised me. Then why are we going? A trace of amusement hovered around his mouth, but his eyes were serious. Because you said you wanted to. I did not. You did too, on the dance floor. No, I said slowly, thinking through that brief conversation to ensure I had it right. I said it sounded interesting. Steve didn't blink. Exactly. You said it sounded interesting, so I told him we would go. And there it was. The thing I had been trying to explain through all of our fights and aborted conversations, lit up like a Christmas tree in the pre-dawn of Christmas morning. Steve, I said it sounded interesting. That doesn't mean I want to go. But, honey, listen, I'm interested in bees, but I don't keep them. I'm interested in physics and engineering and lots of stuff. Doesn't mean I want to do any of them. Saying you're interested and saying yes in that context are the same thing, Steve said. I snorted. Steve, you assumed something. You do it all the time. You give me a choice, and if I say it sounds interesting, you make a decision without asking me if it's what I want to do. We've watched more movies, eaten at more restaurants, and gone places that had the choice than mine we wouldn't have because you assume. This is what I've been trying to tell you. You make all the decisions. The car slowed as if his thoughts weighted down. His finger tapped the console between us. Finally, he spoke. I had no idea. I thought we communicated well. That, I said, is another assumption. Thank you. I'm going to invite Steve up. And Kitty and Elaine, do you guys want to come up and join, or do you want to answer questions that are relevant?
Yeah, we'll wait and answer questions that are relevant.
Okay, sounds great. So if you have questions about more therapeutic kind of stuff, aim them to these guys. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and do we want to put a mic? This one's on too? Should we put this out in the audience?
Well, I don't want to be running.
Okay, this is how I'd like to work it, because I am hard of hearing and I really do want to answer all questions.
That's okay.
So, pardon me? Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so if you guys have a question, please raise your hand for the mic, and Dan here is kind enough to bring it over to you, and we'll just pass that around. So go for it. Questions? Okay, in the back, Lynn.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I read your book, and it's incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly honest and open. And I'm curious when and how the idea to write about what you went through, and as a way of helping other people grappling with similar issues or resonating issues. When and how did you decide to write this into a book like you did? Because it's just so amazingly honest. It's just incredible.
Thank you. The idea originated from Steve, actually, when we were first losing the weight. We dropped, 20, 30 pounds or something between, each. And people were coming up and saying, "Oh my God, you look incredible. What did you do?" And Steve would say, "Oh, it's the romance diet. We invented something new, And he decided, he suggested that I write a book about it, because really what we were doing wasn't rocket science, but it was really effective. And people really wanted to know. And as we told them our story, well, our banker got all excited, and he was like, "Oh, I'm doing it, and I lost 10 pounds." Or somebody, ride their bikes across the patio at La Tienda and say, "Well, we don't dance, but we can ride bikes," And so we thought this would be a great story to tell. And then as we plummeted hard down this rabbit hole, I tabled the idea. And when I came out of what I went through and the therapy that I underwent afterwards, and kind of started putting my life and my mind back together, I realized that I didn't have a choice, that I needed to tell this story, even if it was for Steve and I to look at it objectively and examine where we've been. But as it got going, and we started with, there's some people here in the audience, Margaret, where are you, who, as I was just initiating it, Margaret would read every chapter, and she'd say, "Oh, you need to write more. I need you to write the next chapter. I need this now." And so the book evolved in that way, and that's kind of how it got off the ground. Daniel.
I also read the book, which was amazingly courageous, really powerful. I'm curious to ask Steve, what's it like to be undressed in this fashion?
Actually, it's actually pretty easy. It was clear, chapter by chapter, that this could be a very important book, a very important message for couples. Not about losing weight, but about becoming a stronger couple. And part of the journey for me, part of the journey that we were going through really was about strengthening our relationship by being real partners, which, we're business partners, you know us, but being really more equal and giving up some ego. I've got a lot, so I could give a lot. But no, the message is more important. The healing and the growth that people get from it is worth more than honestly airing our life in public.
Anybody else?
I just want to say, very, very brave thing to do, especially in front of this audience. This is probably going to be the afterwards. Any other book signing is going to be a piece of cake.
What's interesting is that this one is the easiest of. This is my fourth book, and this one is easier than any of them because really, how can you fault me? It's my story. You can't argue with me.
Actually, there's one comment I want to make about that chapter. I honestly think she said, kind of sounds good. I'm interested. But we did have at least 3 whiskeys in us at the time.
Pete, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to ask you the same question. How do you do that? How do you open up so much in a book? Is it hard?
Are you asking me or Steve?
You.
I was raised by artist parents who believed that art was the most important. There was God. Get down on your knees and worship. This is important. And I was trained to be a writer from the time I was 9 years old. And I remember sitting with my dad saying, well, if you're not honest, you're just a shit. Excuse my language. But, so if you're not willing to be honest, then you have no business being a writer because that's what it takes. It takes guts and it takes honesty. And that stayed with me my whole life. I think I've always been honest in my work, and nonfiction comes very easily for me because I am introspective and because, the story's already there. This was scary. I mean, it was definitely scary to release this particular book. Pete, by the way, back there is an attorney, and Pete is the one who recommended the attorney that I needed in this book. Thank you very much, Pete. You did a great job. I don't mind being personal and honest in the world from a distance. It was really hard to release this one in this community because I'm such a public figure. When I was in my studio and all I had to do was come out for shows every once in a while, that was fine. This one was much harder. But in the same breath, the book deals a lot with shame. And I think so many women, and men too, but really women in this culture are riddled with shame. I mean, everywhere we turn, we're failing somehow. Whether it's our body is failing us, or we weren't the mother that we wanted to be to our children, or we can't give the energy to our jobs, or whatever it is, we're supposed to bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never depend on a man. And look sexy, but not too sexy while we're doing it. I mean, we have so many things that we're up against, and for me, this journey was. When you read the book, you'll understand how much shame I was carrying and how that ended up exacerbating and getting so out of control that when I came through to the other side, I really decided that I would not be ashamed. I'm not going to let shame rule my life anymore. And that means telling the truth about what happened and being okay with it because, one of the ways I talk about this book is that it's an extraordinary book because it's such an ordinary story. I'm one of millions of women who have experienced similar things, and while all of our stories are unique, what we have in common is huge. And And so being honest was essential, both to who I am as an artist and to not letting shame rule my life anymore. Okay, anybody else? They're all getting hungry. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I think this book is so important because nowadays when you read about relationships between people, it's like the first little thing that happens, they send a text saying, okay, it's over. You know, nobody's willing to go through the steps that it takes to work through these problems and come out the other end happily like they did.
Thank you. Okay, well, if nobody else has any other questions, or you can ask me when I'm sitting up here. Oh, go ahead, more. Go ahead.
I'm just curious how you're maintaining this romance diet.
Good question. Well, we one of the interesting things is we did both of us get down to our absolute ideal body mass index weight, and we got there and decided this wasn't healthy for us, which is a really interesting thing. You know, skinny is the goal, and we were both really skinny, and it was too skinny. We didn't feel healthy, and so we put some weight back on very deliberately. We just got back from Costa Rica, so we have got a few pounds there that we're going to get rid of. But I think one of the really interesting things about this is that, like, weight loss is something that this country is obsessed with, and the same way that it's obsessed with processed food. And weight, you know, weight is a symptom of self-love, I really think. And if we're healthy and we're loving ourselves and we're caring about ourselves, it's pretty easy to keep the weight off. I find that when I get nervous or stressed, like the book was supposed to be released last week and it was released in December, and I panicked because I wasn't emotionally prepared for that. And yeah, I added a few pounds then. So, I mean, I find that the scale goes up and down according to my own emotional health and how well I'm taking care of myself. We still do share meals. We still do go dancing, and we're also not obsessive with it at this point because we will never go back to where we were. I also think that, you know, there are tons of studies out there that for women, I'll mention this, that women who suffer PTSD are more than twice as likely to be obese than women who haven't experienced this. And they use that weight as an armor to protect themselves against the world, and I think that was certainly true for me. So dealing with the long-term effects of trauma and moving through that helped me to keep the weight off. I think that you can't lose the weight and keep it off unless you're really willing to look hard at the issues that caused the weight gain to begin with. And that really has to do with how much you love yourself and respect yourself and are taking care of yourself at any particular point. So, you know, for me, weight is a thermometer, you know, and it takes our emotional temperature. Go ahead.
Hey, Destiny.
Hi, Kyle.
Back to when you guys were at the bar, when you said it was interesting, what were you really saying?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So one of the things that we discovered was that, and back up here, again, looking at gender roles and how women are taught to be, I think that a lot of women, myself included, learned really young how not to rock the boat, how not to absolutely be assertive, and to make things okay. We always leave ourselves an out. And so when Steve says, what do you think? And I say, oh, it sounds interesting. I'm waiting to see what he's going to do with it. Because if it's something he wants to do, then I'm going to support that or react to it one way or another. But I can leave it open without committing, and then I can stay out of trouble, no matter where we get to. You know, one of the things I talk about in the book is that Steve does 90% of the cooking in our house. I quit when my kids grew up, and he took over, and it's wonderful. But he would call me if I was home and say, what do you want for dinner? And I would say, I don't know, I don't care. You know, whatever you want. And Steve would pick up a steak and a giant steak, and that's what we have for dinner. And, you know, sometimes slathered in mayonnaise. You know, and I didn't care, right? And I didn't care. And one of the things that I learned through this book and this process, or through the process and then, you know, wrote the book about it, is that I have to care. I just have to. And my job now, Steve and I have each of a job. My job is to always tell the truth. I cannot couch the answers. I cannot say, well, that sounds interesting. I have to say, no, I don't really want to do that one. You know, or yeah, this is really what I want to do. And Steve's job is to share his emotions and to be more open in those ways, because both of us are really focused as a couple and individually on living authentic lives and really examining how much of who we are and how we behave is the product of what we've been taught to be by our society at large, and how much is who we choose to be. And so we're shedding stuff, and we tangle on those issues sometimes because we're still figuring this out. You know, like we were at a casino up for a dance a couple of months ago, and we're just getting started practicing these new things. And I'm tired. We've been out dancing the night before, but this was Saturday night. We booked a room. We planned to be out late and have a really good time. And an hour and a half into it, I'm like, I'm tired. I want to go back to the room. And Steve then gets to express his feelings, which, you know, a year ago he would have said, okay, honey, whatever you need, I support you, which I've always loved. And this time he said, well, we were going to stay out all night, you know, and he's showing us this. So we are still figuring this out, but we're being honest with each other and really working to not put forward those set expectations about who a man and a woman is supposed to be in relationship with each other. Does that answer your question, Carl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a comment as much as a question. Thanks.
I really believe in this book tremendously, and I'm going to be forever grateful to both of you for having the journey and then for sharing the journey. And your question was fantastic, and what I'm hoping, and I think, Destiny, what you're hoping too, and Steve, is that this book starts conversations. That it starts conversations between couples, and it also starts conversations among us as community members, because this is how change will happen. I believe in this book so strongly because I believe that you are a change agent and you are going to help healing happen in our culture, in our community. And so I invite you, when you read this book, to talk about it. Talk about it with your loved ones. Talk about it with your friends. Get reading groups together. Get people talking.
And then leave a review.
Yeah, leave a review. But really, because this is where change happens. It happens in ordinary people's stories, and it comes to find out we all have similar stories. So thank you for sharing them, and start reading and talking.
All right, well, I'm guessing most of you are getting pretty hungry. So if you have questions you want to ask me up here, I'll be signing. Steve's going to be wandering around, or right next to me, or wherever you want to be, if you have questions for him. But I think we should move it on for tonight. Thank you again, all of you, so much for your support, in every way, and for being here tonight. Really appreciate it.